alphabetical order. So I have Shavasana, and then I have Y4, which is Bhujangasana, which is the cobra pose. And next is G4. Wow, look at all the fours. Gomukhasana, which is our cow face pose.
Okay.
And our last one is A3, which is Setubandha Sarvangasana, which is the bridge pose, which is
okay, good.
okay. So we'll start in Shavasana, and you could use, and this is where you can make it how you'd like. You could either just lie flat, you could use, a bolster and just start in a, supported Shavasana, however you would, like. So if you're doing this another time today, because it is only, 4 poses, you could adjust and try it a little differently. So I will just lie flat though, which can be nice. And sometimes even removing your mat is a nice way to try, just really thinking about things differently so we can just feel things differently. So if you're on carpet, it can be nice to have the mat gone. On a hot day, just on a cool floor can be nice. But of course, if it is painful for anybody, you have to use some support blankets or whatever. But I'm going to start here. I'm going to actually open my legs out a bit wider and hold the sides of my mat. And pulling the mat a little bit to move the flesh of the upper back down. You'll feel the flesh, maybe even the upper buttock move towards the heels. So it can be a nice way to lengthen the spine. And even though we just woke up, which we were lying down, it can be nice just to extend arms and legs equally. Let the arms and legs release for a few breaths. Feel the alignment, the back of your head, spine, tailbone. Really noticing if your head tends to tilt to one side. That can be, just an indication that maybe the neck muscles are shorter on one side, or upper back muscles, etc. That if the head is tilting to one side. So back of the skull, just trying to feel a lightness on the back of the skull, that the head isn't pressing down too hard. The cervical vertebra naturally, the natural curve, the spreading of your upper back. And there's that gentle lift of your chest with your breath. And then we might begin to notice the rise and fall of the chest and how the abdomen maybe expands and spreads further on the exhalation. Just staying maybe another 4 or 5 breaths. The in-breath, the touch of the breath on the inner walls of the ribs. And then from the diaphragm on the exhalation, the abdomen spreads and releases. And after our next exhalation, and maybe bring your legs in together so the inner legs touch inner knees, inner calf, inner edge of our feet. And you might still hold the sides of your mat. Really open up the bottoms of our feet so it's more like Supta Tadasana, our kind of reclined mountain pose. And again, pull the mat so you feel the length through the spine, through the back. You can even extend your arms up overhead. That stretch and lengthening. If you want, you can even interlace your fingers overhead. That's all right on your neck and shoulders. The heels extending one way, the arms the opposite way. I find when I'm lying down like this, I really can often feel some imbalances in myself. Might be in the hips sometimes, even I feel sometimes one arm tighter than the other, and even along the spine and back, that some muscles. So it can be, again, an awareness, and then we can change that interlace of the fingers. Squeeze the legs together, so there's some action there, the hips and legs, and bring the arms up overhead. And again, feel the abdomen spread, recede, the organs recede, and even the front throat, soft through the throat and jaw, soft through your eyes. They open up through the soles of your feet. And then we can release the arms. I'll bend our knees. Just stay here for a few breaths with your knees bent. Just to let our back settle once more. And then we can roll to the side and then onto our abdomen, because the next pose was Bhujangasana, which was Cobra that I had picked. And I'm going to start this one with the bolster. And maybe not even the height of the bolster, you can just even use maybe a blanket. I'll just show a couple of different ways. You can maybe just have a little bit of blanket here, half folded lengthwise. So coming down, catching, the pubic bone, letting the legs extend, and maybe starting with the legs opening out a little bit more. The toes, we don't want the toes really to roll in too much, or of course to point out. Most people don't do it that way because it's a little more awkward, but we might often have the toes pointing in. But if we can really try to align the center thigh, shin, and top of your foot, okay. So right from that top of the thigh bone, we can extend, and we want to try and get kind of the heel toes all in one line, and then the other leg, and we might just be on our elbows, tailbone moving under a little bit, so down towards the floor, and just lift and lengthen each leg maybe 2 or 3 times, just getting that full length. I think of it as deflating the top of the thighs. So I do have resting on that blanket a little bit, if that feels all right. Trying to extend the legs, so you think of a cobra, right? That long tail. We're trying to lengthen. Get the outer heels moving in a little bit. You can even press the tops of your toes down, tops of your feet. And even here, try and feel your toes lengthen and spread a little bit here. How even that work through the feet, you might feel it back up to the legs and hips. You can come up on the elbows. Think of moving the back ribs in, lifting your chest. Bring your hands forward a little bit. I find it a bit easier to lift up on your back with the hands forward. And lift the chest as much as you can. So there is some, I'm working the legs here still. Tailbone under, front hip bones moving forward and up. Pressing the palms, letting the front armpit chest lift. You might look up a little bit without falling into your neck. Right? Coil the back ribs in. And then we can release. Now you can let the toes kind of come in, heels out. You might fold your forearms and just rest your forehead for a few breaths. And then we can remove the blanket or bolster, whatever you've used. But I will just, if you're going to, if anyone's going to try this again later, or, after the video ends, you want to play around, you could also do, this with the blanket, the other way, where then you're not supporting the chest. Actually, we can try that. Just to feel the difference. Let's turn those blankets across our mat. And you may want to just use one blanket. Two might be too much on your back, okay, for anyone. So you might just want to use one blanket. And then again, we're bringing a little bit more of the pelvis, the top front, the hip bones there onto the blanket. Elbows on the floor, under the shoulders. It's really spreading the collarbones. I have my toes tucked under to start to really get the tailbone coming under. And then start to lengthen again from the top of the thigh to the feet. Really try to watch that the heels aren't falling in and out. That pressing the toes down so that it's a little bit more work for the legs. Even up hamstring, glute. Looking forward. And for people's back, you might just need to stay here. But if you can, again, we're lifting up, making that cobra, elongating. So not just pinching at one vertebra, right? The whole body engaged. And then we can release. Again, you might let the toes come in, cross the forearms. And I know the blanket can feel a little weird, so you can adjust. But that can be nice on the abdomen to have the blanket there. So you might need to, though, adjust where the blanket is for a few breaths. Feel the spread in your lower back and back ribs. And then we'll press and come up. You can move the blankets. Just stay hands and knees for a few moments. It's that neutral spine. And while you're just pausing with this neutral spine before we do the one more, I could have shown before, just for anyone where the floor is too much, you can do this pose, near the wall. For anyone where lying down, it's just a little bit too much on your back, you could be here, activating the legs, pulling down and lifting up, kind of creating that same action. Mini back bend at the wall for anyone that, the floor is not good. Okay, so now from here, we just have that neutral spine for a few breaths. You can untuck the toes, lowering down. Again, now we're extending from the top of the thigh, getting that alignment of the feet. They're not falling in or out. Trying to even press the top metatarsals down to the floor. You can bring the legs in if that's all right in your back. Back issues, it might be better to keep the feet apart. If you can, legs together like the tail of the cobra. You can even take your hand and help deflate that top of the thigh away from the groin. So we want to really minimize the space of that front groin to the floor. Elbows can be under your shoulders. Tailbone moving under a little bit so that it kind of helps create some space here at the lumbar sacral area. And again, if it's better for your back, you're staying here. If you can, start to press to lift up. The whole spine elongating upwards, so it's not just pushing at one point in your back. We're lifting up. You can look up. Anyone's able to maybe release down and bring the hands more under the shoulders and lift up. So that would be a little more intense on the back. So the purpose, of this back bend, to not just jar in the lower back, but to get into the upper back, use of the legs, try and straighten your arms, looking up, try and keep the feet pressing. And then we can slowly release down. Really watch those front ribs aren't poking down to the floor. You might need to lift up. Get those front ribs moving in, so you're more on your sternum. Rest your forehead. And then we'll press, we'll come up, hands and knees. Stay with that neutral spine for a few breaths. I know we might want to do kind of that cat-cow, but I would just say keep a neutral spine for a few breaths first. And you can be, still trying to press tops of the feet, move the tailbone back so you get a little bit more of a stretch in your, you'll feel some release here in the lower back. So even though I'm on hands and knees, I'm trying to move the tailbone back a little bit, the chest forward, just to spread and release in that lumbar area. And now you could tuck the chin and tailbone under just really slowly. For those that especially find that pose, maybe a bit hard on the back, just to release the head, tuck the tailbone under. Still try to press the tops of your feet down, the palms as if you're pushing through the floor. And we can come back to that flat back. So our next pose is Gomukhasana, which is the cow face pose. And because we know that, we're here, this is where I sometimes would play around with different ideas. So I'm going to bring the right leg behind the left. Just working this idea of the pose, right, in Gomukhasana, you're crossing arms and legs when you're standing. So you can work this action here on hands and knees, right? I'm not sure if you can see. So I've brought the one leg behind. And just get that idea of rolling your outer thighs in. And I've realized I've mixed up Gomukhasana is this pose. I was thinking Garudasana, eagle pose. So I'm still going to do it this way, but they're both similar in how you're crossing the thighs, and then we can release, maybe stretch the legs back one at a time, and then do the same to the other side. So I'm bringing the left leg behind the right, and squeeze those outer thighs in, feel the front groin moving back. And then we can release. So for this pose now, so the arms in Gomukhasana were coming up and behind. So now we could either stand and do that arm action, or you could sit in Virasana, just to get the arm action a little bit in hero's pose, or you could sit in Sukhasana, your cross leg pose, and we'll just work the arms a little bit. If you need the belt, so if you're not able to catch the hands behind, you might want to take your belt. I'll bring the belt over my right shoulder to begin. Inhale, reaching up with the right arm, really wrapping the outer arm in, lift and lengthen up. Bend your right elbow, reach behind with the left arm to catch the belt or your fingers. And again, if you're repeating this, practicing later, just work on maybe holding this a little bit longer. And even the idea, I have my arm here kind of touching my head. What happens when you start to move the arm away from the side of your head, still wrapping the outer arm in, rolling the shoulder bones back. So you can spend some time here just with the arms. And then we'll slowly release. We'll bring the belt to the other side. Inhale, we'll extend the left arm up, wrapping the outer arm in and lifting, getting that length through the sides. Bend the left arm and reach behind with your right. And again, if you're not able to catch the hand, you're holding the belt. So the belt becomes an extension of your arm. And then try and move the inner arm away from the side of the head. Lift and lengthen that tricep area up, so the elbow lengthening up. Lower abdomen moves in and up. There might be a tendency to tilt forward. Try and align back of the head, spine, and tailbone. And then we can release. Can come forward, and I'll just show some options for the legs, and we'll just do this kind of quickly, and then we'll go to the next pose because I'll have to head out in about 5 minutes. But from here, so Gomukhasana, an alternative, I just want to show the alternative if the legs isn't good, the knee crossing, that is the traditional way. So you can bring, right foot to the left outer hip, left foot to the right outer hip. This can be an alternative for Gomukhasana, legs, and then adding the arms. Okay. So I just want to show that, because then the full pose is bringing one leg behind, which we had done already, and then sitting back. And if you find you need some support between your sitting bones and your heel, you can add a blanket, but watch this foot. We don't want it doing all sorts of things. It's the same as Bhujangasana. We want the foot to go back. And then we come to sit. So choose the leg action that will be best for you. If this is too much for someone's knees, hips, then you might need to do the way I just showed before. I'll show this from the front. So here, bringing that blanket onto the heel, which you may or may not need. I'm just showing that you can add some height. And then this top leg, as much as you can, you want it to be coming in close to the other leg. But sometimes we feel we're up really high, like this, we can't sit down lower. So then you might let the foot slide out a little bit. But over time, we're trying to bring that leg in a bit closer. Okay. If you need the belt, you have the belt. And I didn't say which leg would be on top. So I have my right leg on top. So then I'm going to bring the belt over the left shoulder. If you have the left leg on top, bring the belt over the right shoulder. It's opposite arm coming up to the leg that is on top. So I have my right leg on top, lifting my left arm, bend the elbow. If you can, reaching behind, catching the hands or belt. If you're with the legs, one crossed over the other, balancing on the shin bone, still pressing the toes, right? That top metatarsal, how that can actually help us to balance. Try and notice if you're tilting a little bit to one side more than the other. The spine, elongating spinal muscles, and try and bring the chest more forward and lift that armpit chest up, lift the top elbow, and then we can slowly release. We'll release the legs, however it's best for you. Some people might need to slide that top leg out first. You might be able to come forward. If you're sitting on the block, you're changing which leg is on top now. I'm going to come hands and knees and bring the opposite leg. From the back, I am trying as much as I can to start, keep those shins together to come back to sit on heels. Okay. As I said, that top leg might start to slide out. If you can, you're keeping it going, the toes running back behind, but sometimes at the beginning, the foot slides out. So you have to gauge where you can be stable at this time. I'm going to bring my belt over right shoulder. Squeeze the outer legs in, move the sitting bones down, let the lower abdomen lift up and back as we inhale and stretch the right arm up. Bend the elbow and reaching behind for the belt or fingers. So sometimes what happens is we fall into one side rib. It's usually on the side, the elbow that's going up, the other side. So try and keep the sides of the waist long, parallel to each other. Press that top thigh down, it tends to lift up. But press the top thigh down. The eyes forward. Wrap that outer arm in, that top arm, and lift the inner elbow up. And then we can slowly release. Come forward, we'll release our legs. And maybe briefly come into Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog pose. Press the palms down and feel a suction up. Same with the feet, the toes lengthening, inner outer heel descending down, center heels descending down. That inner arch lift up. And then we'll slowly come down. So our last
pose is Satyabhata Sarvangasana in our little yoga bingo. There's many different ways we could do this pose. There is the one where you could have your bolster. I won't do this one, but you might want to try this one later, where we have the blocks at the wall, the bolster, and blanket. So this is a more restorative version coming in to this pose where the chest is open, feet at the wall on the blocks. Okay, so this is one version of Setu. But I think just to end, and I will be leaving, I'll leave you in this pose, but I also like to use either blankets or bolster for the shoulders. Maybe I'll keep to the blankets, similar to how we had done with the last couple of poses, 2 blankets across the mat, and then a brick. And you don't have to use the height. You can do this pose with no props at all, but I like to have my shoulders up a little bit higher. I feel a bit more freedom in my neck. And so I have my shoulders up on the blanket, back of the head to the floor, press through the feet, lift your hips, tuck those shoulders under, and then let the sacrum rest on the brick. Bring those heels down, roll your inner arm out. And so really opening up through the armpit area. Palms can be open. You might even take your hands and just back of the head. But just like that, the first pose where we held the mat and moved the flush upper back away, we want that skin of your upper back to move away from the neck, the shoulder blades to move in. And I just press the outer shoulders down, light again on the back of your skull. So even though the back of the skull does press down a little bit, kind of light there, so you're not feeling a lot of pressure in your head, face, or throat. Really open through the abdomen. Soft through the palms. You can press your feet down. And depending on your height, you might need to add like a block and a half. So if you're taller, under your hips, you might need to add a little bit more height. To get that chest open. And maybe, Doug, can you bring your arms down a bit lower? Yeah, just keep the shoulders on the blanket if you're using the blanket. So the full shoulder on the blanket, more like a Sarvangasana, if that's all right on neck and all that. Yeah, that looks a little bit better for the chest and the throat soft. Eyes relaxed. So I will leave you here for this morning. You can stay in that bridge pose, another minute or so longer as you wish. I will send an email with these poses again. And just let me know how you felt about that sequence, because it's interesting. You wouldn't think I was starting with Shavasana first all the time, but it actually became, I feel, a nice sequence in terms of how we had to align our legs. Get the chest open, because the chest opening in the bridge pose you know, is similar to how we want it open in the cobra, just kind of flipped. And I hope you have a great day.